I'm from Treaty 3, and Treaty 3 was signed in 1873 on October 3rd. It started roughly around 1869 and it took a few years. And that's because when the Europeans were making treaties in the east of Canada, they were making a lot of atrocities and they broke a lot of promises with those treaties. And so my people, which is in Treaty 3 area, they had messengers and soldiers and knowledge keepers. And the messengers would go and find out information and they'd come back. And so what they told the elders was that those treaties that they were making were not being honored and that there were wars happening. And so my people began to prepare, and that they knew that the crown wanted to make these treaties, and they knew that commissioners were coming into our territory. The British crown gave orders to the commissioners to come to our territory so that they could secure lands on our territory for the crown. So the commissioners would come across the lands and try to make these treaties with our people so that they could secure the land. Our people knew that they were coming and that there was a lot of wars that had already been happening. So the best option was to have a treaty to make peace. And that's what our people wanted to do, and we were willing to share. And so when the commissioners came to our territory, our people decided not to make that treaty right away for a couple of reasons, because the treaties that were happening further east were not being honored, and also because they were rushing the treaty process and were trying to get them to sign it really quick. And there's also a document, a journal report from one of the commissioners that reported that he needed to get the treaty signed as speedily as possible because he was under pressure from the crown and he needed to get that signed, those documents signed. And so he was rushing the process. But in our ways, we don't rush those things. We have ceremony and talk for a long time and make sure we know what we're getting into. So our people began to prepare through ceremony and through talking and preparing for what they were going to be getting into. And so when the commissioners started making their way into our territory, they wanted to make a treaty, and our people said no. And so the commissioners decided to bypass them, and they kept continuing going west, and they made Treaty 1 and 2, and then they turned back around and came back to our territory and asked to make a treaty again. And the chiefs decided that they would, but that they would need time. It took a long time, many nights. There was ceremonies, shake tents, and our people would honor these treaties through ceremony and with the pipe and talking to the Creator and the spirits. And our people would have treaties this in a sacred way, and there was gift exchanges, and treaties would be renewed every year, so that relationship and that treaty would be strong every year. So that's how our people would have treaties. And so when the commissioners arrived, they were offering annuities and payments. So their view was more of a business transaction. And so our people were very careful and really wanted to understand what they were getting into. So they brought interpreters. They brought the light-skinned people, which is known as the Métis people today. they brought them to be interpreters, and they recorded what was happening there at that treaty. And so the chiefs that were there, they spoke nothing about ceding or surrendering the lands. And there's documents that were found, and a few of those documents that have been found, they're recordings of what was said in those treaties. And in those documents, none of them say the same things, and none of them say that we surrendered the lands, and none of them talked about ceding the lands or giving up lands. One of the documents talked about that the crown was going to offer supplies for tools for farming, and that we could still be free people, and that we were always free, and that we could hunt and fish like we always have, and that wasn't going to be interrupted. And there's also another document that said that the chief there at that signing of the treaty asked the commissioner that they would adopt each other's children, and so that way that the treaty could live on and be secured, and so that the children would learn from each other, and that way there would be peace. And in that document, the commissioner replied that and assumed that the chief was saying that they wanted to be educated, and he was suggesting that everybody should think like that and be educated. But in our ways, adopting children was a way to bring peace and to solidify treaty, and that's how serious it was. It was a year later when the commissioner came back and brought a final report of what was said, and on the Crown's report, it says nothing of the same thing as those reports that were documented by the witnesses that were there. So they're different. On the Crown's report, it says that we ceded the lands and surrendered lands, and there was rules and regulations for hunting and fishing, and that was not talked about in the treaties. And most importantly, we did not surrender the lands. And today the elders still talk about how the land was never surrendered, and that in our culture, the land can't be surrendered, and that the land is a gift from the Creator. Before these treaties were happening, and before the Europeans came and settlements were happening, our people had a really great society, and we had governments, and we were organized. Our people would meet in the springtime and organize hunting trips and territory boundaries. There was justice, and we had responsibilities to the land, and that was our responsibility that was given to us by the Creator, and that the foods and the lands and the waters was given to us by the Creator, and those things can't be sold. So we never surrendered the lands, and the lands are still ours today. And so after the treaty was signed, there was, of course, the Indian Act that made banned our culture and made many regulations, and that did not honor the treaties that were promised. And so, for an example, our people built canoes, and we started making a business, and we're selling them to the settlers, and the settlers would buy them, and our people were making a good business that way. And so they banned that, and they told anyone who was going to buy, any settler that was going to buy a canoe would go to jail. And so that was a law. But any settler could build a canoe and they were able to sell, and they were able to make a business that way. So those were the many regulations that happened from under the Indian Act. And so today, the mining and the deforestations that is happening around the territory is basically against the law, because it goes against the treaties and what was promised. Today, our people fight in the law courts and try to use the documents that were written by the witnesses that were there and use those documents for their case to protecting the lands and the waters in Treaty 3 area.